Three, two, one. Christine Asbury. Previously the CEO of WCS Care Group and now the Director of Insight and Innovation at QCS. Welcome to the Care Home Show.
Thank you, Simon. I'm looking forward to it.
It's well, I'm certainly looking forward to the conversation as well. So let's go straight into this. So, do you think that the care sector has lost its way, and are people focused on the wrong things?
No, I don't think I go that far. I think that the care sector has become fairly static. I think COVID has narrowed the focus of the sector massively, and that's been a loss for everybody involved, but actually it's also strengthened it in many ways. But I think COVID aside, in general, we've got a product that works in the care sector, and for many providers, and not all providers, because there are lots of them who actually are really struggling and were struggling before COVID, but for many, they get a good profit margin out of it. So there isn't much impetus for them to change because what they're doing works. And I think that's where the sector is. It's a bit stuck in doing the same thing the way it's been done for 20, 30 years. But that said, there is a lot of innovation out there. And that's what's exciting to me, and I think that's especially true for not-for-profit providers, but there's some really great for-profit providers out there as well doing really interesting different things.
So within that then, do you think that there's or at least there has been a mindset of, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and that maybe there's a thought process or a belief system that's kind of shifting towards being maybe more open-minded, more creative, and more focused on innovation, however that might show up in their organisation?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think 10 years ago, a lot of the focus on how the sector could look different was just on how buildings should look, and that they should be very luxury focused. And I recognise the link there that actually people do want to live in pleasant environments, and many care homes are very old-fashioned. But actually you can have a beautiful luxurious environment. It's really the experience of daily living that matters. And I think that has been where people haven't thought enough. So it's been easy to carry on doing things the way we always do, and anybody who's been in care for a long time is absolutely immersed in all of the practice and procedures and things that are necessary, and they are necessary, but actually if that's all you're doing, then it's not enough. And likewise, if all you're doing is providing a luxury environment, but actually the life within that luxury environment isn't exciting and stimulating, then it's not enough in my book.
I've in relative close proximity to each other, I've been to glorious environments with beautiful interiors and things like that, where there's a real lack of energy, there's a very kind of flat culture, and there's very limited smiles, kind of first and foremost, in some homes, and then I've been in more very kind of homely homes which are kind of more traditional and things like that, and you can feel the energy as you walk through the door. Now, of course, some people will of course want to live in a more homely environment because that's what that's the environment they want to live in, and some people want to live in a more luxurious environment. But I don't think there's anyone that wants to live in an environment that's flat and has kind of a very neutral or even potentially negative energy, when the alternative can be in somewhere that's vibrant and that has kind of a palpable positive energy, which when you walk through the door of a care home that has that energy, it will put a smile on your face as well, because you'll see resident interactions, you'll see team members with big smiles on their face because they're doing what they love. And that all contributes again to that kind of that palpable energy as well. So, do you worry that there may be some operators, because of the kind of the nature of the kind of the highly regulated nature of being in the social care world, and of course kind of in a world where cost is such an imperative, do you think that some operators get kind of lost somewhere between the Chloes maybe on one hand and their P&L on the other?
Yeah, I think there probably is that temptation. I think too many providers frame their ambition around the Chloes and the CQC's Chloes. And I think that can be quite prescriptive and quite reductive, that actually there's a lot more to care than what's written down in a series of key lines of inquiry. And if you focus on that, you might be missing the human factor you've just been talking about. It's not to say that regulation isn't important, but actually I would like to see providers defining their own ambition and saying, this is what we want best practice to look like, and this is what we're going to do, and being brave enough to just go out and do it, rather than saying, is it what the CQC want? And then, yeah, the P&L issue, I think, you know, WCS was a not-for-profit provider, but as people used to say, that doesn't mean they're for loss. We still had to make a profit. And if you have the confidence, the courage of your convictions, I think there is every chance that you will continue to be profitable. And certainly that was the case for WCS. We had to be. We couldn't have invested in the creativity and the innovation we did if we weren't also profitable. So actually, I think, you know, back to my original point, I think if you are privately funded, you've got private investors, sometimes they are looking at the bottom line, and you've got to justify why you're going to spend and why you're going to do things differently. And I don't mean spending on kit or whatever. I mean, it also means spending on staffing, or not focusing on your CQC ratings as being the only KPI that matters. So I think it's easy to just carry on doing the same old thing, and I think it's tempting to carry on doing the same old thing. Actually,
it's an interesting one with the CQC side of things, isn't it? I would take the view that the rating that a home achieves from the CQC should be a reflection of the work that's done to create a fantastic living experience for people living in the environment, rather than a target to obtain those particular criteria, if you will. And I guess it's because you almost have to be so detail orientated to understand and appreciate the clothes, because let's face it, there's an awful lot of information there, and you can really get lost in them. I think it's easy to fall into that trap, and I think you said that before. But unfortunately, if that's your only target, then that ultimately it's going to kind of stifle your creativity, because it's effectively just turns into a tick box type scenario. So. Yeah. I mean, are you worried that people, if they do just tick all of the CQC's boxes, that they're gonna be in a set of circumstances where they can't guarantee their residents the best possible life experience and great care?
I think that would be overstating it to say I'm worried. I think I am disappointed if that's what people do. That said, I think that most care is good care, and most care is great care. And you know, if you're doing it by the book, it's possible that you will miss the human factor because you're too busy following a procedure and doing it. You've got to have those procedures. You've got to have those points of reference. But actually, it is too easy to only do that, and to miss the whole point of this, which is that this is about human interaction. It's about a two-way process between a resident and a carer, and you know, it's about creating communities within care homes, and CQC can't prescribe that. You just can't, and you can't, like you say, you can't define it. It's just different. There's an energy there that's different. And I think probably the majority of care providers and the majority of care homes get that right. When I went to WCS Care, I had no experience of residential care. I'd never, you know, been involved in delivering. I've been involved in different sorts of care and support for older people and for people with disabilities and autism and learning disabilities. So I didn't know what to expect, and I was really surprised by how much easy love and laughter there was in WCS care homes. And you know, the majority of them are not purpose-built new buildings. They're old buildings that need a lot of input to really be brought up to modern day standards, but the life people are living in them is fantastic. And that's what really matters, because it's that interaction. You know, the person who is living in a care home doesn't give two hoots about what the CQC Chloes are. They just want to know, do they feel safe? Are they being cared for? Do they feel loved and valued? That, you know, do they feel stimulated? Those are the things that matter. And those are so much harder. I know CQC try as a regulator, with possibly conflicting expectations that they are supposed to improve the quality of care as well as regulate it. And I know they make a real effort to do that, but I don't know how compatible that is actually, because you can't define, you can't put down in a Chloe on a piece of paper some of those things.
Yeah, I've never really thought about it like that before, but in my consultancy business, we do mock inspections. That's kind of part of our suite of stuff that we do for people. And my team were absolutely adamant that if we were going to do that, that it couldn't just be kind of a mock inspection. It almost had to be a mock inspection plus. And that was really trying to. All of my team have got. Come from kind of senior leadership roles in the care sector. They've got kind of several decades worth of experience between them, and it was about, okay, so how do we use that experience to then guide people with practical application? So this is kind of relevant to the Chloes. This is objectively where you are, but then to go and drive that resident experience, what do we need to do? What does the client then need to do to be able to go and take that to the next level in kind of almost like a roadmap form? So I guess being conscious of what you've just said, I guess my team are probably very much of the same mindset. It's how do you bring it to life? And how do you kind of inject that kind of positive energy and the creativity and things into where you are today as relevant to where you could be in the future aspirationally? Yeah,
which is sort of leadership, really, is what we're talking about. And I think that's one of the problems in the care sector, is that leadership isn't valued enough. And, you know, care home managers don't get enough support around leadership. And, you know, perhaps back to your original point, many of the owners of businesses and the top leaders of those businesses aren't engaged enough at the right level. So they're looking at, you know, KPIs, occupancy, profit, CQC ratings, but are they looking at what it's really like to live in one of those care homes?
I've always said there's, like, for me, management is all about kind of spreadsheets and data and numbers and kind of optimization and all of those types of things. And obviously there's a place for that. You've got to manage stuff, but if you only focus on the management side of things, you're only ever going to get that kind of you never get, you can't
be task focused.
Exactly, like you're going to be kind of open-minded to kind of creativity and innovation, because again you're following kind of a very kind of cookie cut type approach, and you can never create a culture, a positive culture that's open and creative and all of those types of things by managing spreadsheets. It's just an impossible thing to do. That only comes about through great leadership. And that comes through leaders within the business leaning into what they're doing and supporting their team and driving the type of energy, just as much as anything else, into the kind of the direction of travel, the aspirations and things that they're looking to achieve in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was talking last week to the QCS team about what a registered manager has to do, and when you look at the breadth of, you know, responsibilities and tasks that a registered manager has to do, it's amazing they have time to even get to know their residents and to actually provide that input. And, you know, really good care home managers do that, but a lot of them just get bogged down in the task and the data and the, you know, the reporting and all of those things. I think we are over-regulated. I think there is too much reporting, because I think that ends up being that you're constantly sitting behind a desk reporting on things rather than out there really leading. And I think the other thing is, you know, possibly some of the reasons for the success at WCS was that we were very small We had, when I left, we had 13 care homes, and as a leadership team, we were very engaged with what's really going on in those care homes. That's what I cared about. What's going on in those care homes? What's the quality of life like for those people who are living there? Not, have you got everything in order for the next CQC inspection? I don't think that's important, but actually there were other people who could think about that. I didn't need to. And I think possibly, this is where I start to get provocative. I've never quite understood what most chief executives do, because they always tell me how busy they are and how pressured their lives are. But I wasn't. Perhaps I was a particularly lazy chief executive, but I always had time. I always had time to respond to people, to go and do shifts in care homes, to to talk to people, to respond to an email. So I just don't really get what those chief executives are doing. But I think if they're not responsive and engaged, then their businesses may well not have that vibrancy that I would like to see.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I guess whether you're a CEO or whomever else, anyone can be a busy fool, unfortunately. And when there's so much stuff that you could be doing, it is easy to fall into that trap for sure. But I mean, I know some CEOs of both care home businesses and other organisations as well, who they've always got time. They've always got time, and that's almost one of their best characteristics. Because I know that the team love the fact that they can call them up and say, "Hey, this is just something that's going on. I thought you might want to know about it." And then to not be, "Oh well, I'll give you a shout about this maybe next week." It's a case of, okay, great, let's explore this. Let's look at this. It seems important, and that. Almost don't want to say responsive because it's part of the CQC framework, but being in a position where you can have those types of real conversations and that time and that to be able to be generous like that, I think is very, 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 very important. I think there's my experiences, I guess, my conversations that I've had with people are somewhat anecdotal, but I speak to an awful lot of senior leadership teams and people in care homes on a kind of a year by year basis, and I do feel that that we're just managing the kind of cost base, if you like. If you're only ever focused on that and you're not looking at kind of creating value, managers can get stifled because there's no opportunity to invest in maybe technology or extra team members like an admin, a CRM, whatever it might be. And if the manager, who ultimately has to wear a multitude of different hats, is just getting bogged down and stuck in the detail of everything, how are they going to end up spending time on the floor and getting to know their residents? How are they going to get the opportunity to build relationships with their team and the community and things? It's almost impossible. And I mean, I have such great admiration for care home managers, because it's a wildly crazy job when you just think about all of that responsibility. But if you think about all of that responsibility and next to no resource, whether that be, again, time or money to kind of invest in things, it just becomes more and more difficult. And different homes are in different demographics, and it's certainly easier in different places to be able to kind of achieve greater, I guess, kind of commercial success in some areas rather than others. But I think there's a lot of missed opportunity as well, that could be tapped into, that benefits everyone at the end of the day, everyone within the organisation, all the people living in the homes, and ultimately the communities that are being served by the care homes as well.
I think as well, it depends, and different providers do this differently. It depends how engaged your leaders are with your care home managers and how much communication there is. If you're a manager who is left out there to do it on your own, that can work. I've seen managers where they run the home as a small business with no reference to the wider business, and if they're good and they're lucky, that it can be very successful. But I think there's an awful lot more who are stuck out there knowing they're only going to be measured on their quality ratings and their EBITDA, and actually the rest of the time they're on their own, and when they have challenges and problems, they're on their own. And I think that, you know, where are those people going to get the confidence to try new things and do things differently? Because they aren't, you know, especially as so many managers, and not all, but so many registered managers have come up through the structure of a care home and started as a cook or a care, you know, a cleaner or a carer, and have gradually worked their way up. So everything they learn from the care environment. And if they're not, you know, so their leadership skills are not particularly well developed, and their leadership skills may well be modelled on the leaders they've had, which, if that's not, you know, that hasn't been great, and it hasn't been supportive, and it hasn't been challenging in the right way, then they're going to end up keeping their heads down and just trying to get through the day.
You can't underplay how people have been led and managed in the past. For one of the businesses I'm involved in, we were looking at hiring somebody fairly recently, but he'd had two quite arrogant managers. This is somebody that was going to join us in a sales capacity, and it just shone through in his interview that he thought that was the way to behave, to kind of have this kind of garish kind of outlook and things like that. And I was just shocked for a relatively young person, great track record, loads of energy, but it just didn't make us feel good. And it wasn't the fact that I think that the particular individual was a bad individual in any respect. Unfortunately, though, he picked up some really bad habits, and I guess maybe I hope that later on in his career and things like that, he'll see that as the wrong way to do things, and to have that as kind of a life lesson. Because let's be honest, I think if I'm speaking for myself, a lot of the things that I try and lean away from in my role as a leader in the various different things that I'm involved in, I've learned from seeing people that I've worked with in the past do a horrible job of it, and I just don't want to be that person. But you can get again, it's an easy trap for people to fall in, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting, actually. I was talking to somebody yesterday who was describing something that one of his staff members had done, and saying to me, do you think that's a dismissible offence? And you know, I think too much of that happens it's a revolving door in the care sector, that we manage people by bringing them in, giving them minimal training, then when they mess up, they're out the door again. But actually, is that the best thing for that care home, for those residents, for you know, for the sustainability of the business? And you're not making a decision on, is this offence dismissible or not? I mean, there are some things where there's no question, you know, abuse or anything like that, of course you're out of the door. But if it's something different, actually you need to look at it much more holistically. What's the outcome we want here? We do not just want to say, this is the process and we're going to follow it and therefore you've gone. We actually want to say, you know, is this person has good relationships with the residents, this person, you know, is a great worker, this person didn't have the training they should have had. Actually, what can we do to correct that behaviour without actually pushing them out of the door? And I think too often management is just too clear cut and too knee-jerk, and it shouldn't be.
Also, as well, like, if it's out of character for somebody to do something that kind of falls into that category, like, what's going on in your world that, like, this, have that conversation and just say, look, is there something that's going on in your world that that maybe that you're not happy with? Because, like, most people aren't inherently bad. People cock up all the time on human. Everyone's human. Like, we all do things that we all do things that we'd rather not have done, maybe in the moment when we're having a particularly bad day. I've just done one of those recently, by the way, that I'm kicking myself on, so I can talk about experience, certainly. But we all have these moments and things where we don't kind of behave at our absolute best. But to automatically go into kind of a rigorous kind of HRE type process, when it could be more of an empathetic, is everything all right type before we go down that, is everything okay? Because 9 times out of 10, people have just had a bad day, you know, woke up on the wrong side of bed, maybe they had an argument with somebody that they cared about and their brain was just elsewhere. So being real and authentic before kind of going down that type of line, I think there's great value in it. It's very human as well. Very, very
Yeah,
good.
I agree.
So tell me about your experience at WCS, and what did you do differently? Because I think WCS is quite a special organisation in many ways. So
I think so too.
yeah, help me understand a little bit more about that.
I think it was, when I joined WCS, in some ways it was just a very conventional care provider, but it had some really good things going for it. So it had some really good people throughout the organisation, and it had a really embedded sort of operating procedure and set of policies and so on. So there was a good framework there when I got there. But as I said, I hadn't actually worked in residential care before. So I didn't come in with an expectation about how this should be. And I just kept asking, why? Why are we doing this? Why don't we do that? And often the answer would be, I don't know really, we haven't thought, we've always done it like this, or we haven't thought about it. And then I'd only been there a few months when my mum organised a holiday with the extended family, and we all went to this Fawlty Towers hotel in Bournemouth, which she absolutely loved. The rest of us all found it quite tricky, but you had to sit at the same table for breakfast, and so there would be 16 of the extended family with some great grandchildren and things like that all sitting around this table. And I realised how uncomfortable my mum was. She was worried about getting crumbs on the tablecloth from the 1-year-old. Oh, don't get crumbs on the tablecloth, they'll have to clear that up. And I was just sort of saying, Mum, that's what they're there for. But it made me realise that actually, if she was living in a hotel-like environment, she would be really, really uncomfortable. She wanted to live somewhere where she felt she could get crumbs on the tablecloth. And so that started to influence my thinking about this. What we need to do needs to be somewhere where people feel comfortable, that people feel at home. And so I started to look at what was it, I was already interested. I was already working shifts to get to know staff and residents and to understand how the whole thing worked. But then I started to think, why are we delivering care in the same way everybody else does? Does it have to be like that? And then we started going off and looking at, De Hoogeveen in near Amsterdam, and the National Care Forum did a study trip to Germany, where we saw lots of care that I wouldn't want to emulate, but also saw one care provider where they'd created households of 6 people, and the whole of the life of the household was centered around a big old-fashioned sort of farmhouse kitchen table. And I just thought, that is the sort of care I would like to see being delivered. And that's where it all came from. But it very much evolved. Ed, who's now the chief executive, had been in post not for all that long as director of operations, but he'd done every role in the business before he got to be director of operations. So he really knew the business inside out. And the two of us together, there was just a synergy. It was like, we can do things differently. We're willing to try. Let's do it. So that's how it happened, really.
Having had the opportunity to get to know Ed a little bit recently, you can see how aligned you both are in your kind of vision around how to do it differently. And I think the kind of almost the route to doing things differently is to ask the exact question that you told me that you asked. Why? Just a simple question. It's really, really important. Why are we doing things that way? And you can go from there. And that's like, I really value disruption, and in the tech world, it's seen as a great thing. I think in the care world, people are often kind of a little bit scared of it. But it's not disruption for disruption's sake. It's just about asking the question why. It's about and you don't need to. That doesn't mean you have to change everything and throw the baby out with the bathwater type thing. But where there are opportunities for improvement, scratch under the surface. Go and see whether you can find them, and you'll be amazed at kind of what magic can kind of come out the other side.
Yeah. And also, just asking why, people get into very set ways. So one of the things I always do whenever I go to visit a care home, one of WCS's or anywhere else, is I always go and check the doors to the outside. And they're always locked, not in WCS, but anywhere else. And I was going around a luxury care home about a year ago, just opening. It was absolutely beautiful, just, you know, beautifully designed and set up, and the gardens were gorgeous with lots of really interesting things. And I went to the doors and tried it, and they were locked. And so I asked the person who showed me around, do you keep the doors to the garden locked? And his answer was, I should hope so. Whereas my answer is, well, why? You know, you've got beautiful things out there in the garden, tactile things that people will be attracted. You know, they were actually like, they were model sheep.
Right, okay.
Wouldn't you want to go out and actually, are those real sheep? Can I touch them? You know, how great is that sort of engagement for someone maybe with dementia or, you know, someone cooped up inside? But actually, no, they're keeping the doors locked. But why? What is it about the outdoors that means they can't go outside?
I guess my fear would be that they're wrapped up in the Chloes. They're looking at keeping people safe, and they're thinking to themselves, well, we can't keep the doors unlocked because people might become unsafe.
Yeah.
One of the things that my dear friend and colleague Sue Goldsmith, so she's our director of care quality services, she talks about positive risk taking, and that's such a big thing for her, because it's ingrained in kind of the way that we operate now, because it was from the very beginning it was clear that was something that Sue was incredibly passionate about. But you can't wrap people in bubble wrap. You need to give people a life, and you can't do that if you're just presenting people with restrictions all of the time. So again, it's an unfortunate probably symptom of unfortunately people being lost in the world of Chloe's, and maybe not leaning more in the direction of the lifestyle of the people that they're the residents in the home. So yeah, it's a shame. Maybe this conversation, people will look at maybe some of their own practice and think to themselves, well, how could we? Maybe they'll start asking themselves some questions as to why they're doing similar stuff. So hopefully this will be a positive step for a selection of the people that listen to the podcast as well. So
Hope so.
Let's hope. One of the things that I'm intrigued to find out is, so WCS is kind of recognised as being a technology, or a leader in technology, I should say. Is that reputation accurate, would you say?
I think probably actually that the leader in technology bit has been somewhat overtaken by lots of things other people are doing, but we were early adopters. But I think people made the assumption that WCS was about technology. And as you know, we created an innovation hub because so many people wanted to come and see what we were doing. And that was partly because they were hearing about our use of technology. And it was partly because at that stage, we had half of our homes had outstanding ratings, mostly actually before we adopted the technology and the innovation, interestingly. So people thought they were coming to see technology when they came to our innovation hub, and what they found was that actually they were seeing a vibrant home where people were living active lives, and they would start down in the communal cafe area, and they would move around the home, going into the households, but not too much, because actually obviously that's invading people's private space. So we tried to keep it mainly in the communal areas, but it would be an hour and a half before they got up to the innovation hub where they saw the actual technology. So they would see, before that, they would see the cafe, the cinema, the laundrette, the shop, the side-by-side bike outside, the bowling green. And yes, they would go into an unoccupied room and we would talk to them about how the acoustic listening technology worked. But actually, I think people were always surprised that they weren't seeing more technology. And then I think the reason the technology was there was to deliver a different life for people and a better life experience. And I think people can get stuck on thinking technology will solve their problems. So actually, what we were talking about and what made it work for us was good leadership, that we knew we had an ambition, we knew why we wanted to do something, and what we wanted to do was not to install some technology, but to improve, so in the case of acoustic listening technology, to improve the quality of people's sleep at night and to increase the amount of privacy and dignity they had, but also where they were distressed or where they needed help to get to them quickly. So those were the things we wanted to do. And then it's, okay, here's a piece of kit that will do it. but actually, if you and then you know, just to continue with that that example, we found when we installed it in our second home, the first week, the staff came to us and said, oh, you need to turn the sensitivity down on the acoustic technology because it's being set off by the sound of our feet as we walk up and down the corridors. And we said to them, well, hang on a minute. If your feet marching up and down the corridors is setting off the technology, do you think it might also be impacting on residents' sleep? And you know, it's going to be that if it's setting off the acoustic listening technology, it's going to be disrupting residents. So actually, what we need to turn down is the sound of you walking up and down the corridors, not actually the technology. So, and that's about leadership. You know, it's so, and actually, unless you get why you're doing it and you've got people who are prepared to think, ask questions, you can get stuck into some ruts. You can implement technology, but actually you won't improve people's lives.
Yeah, there's I've seen it before where people have tried to implement a piece of technology because they really like the idea of the technology, and culturally the team aren't ready to embed that bit of technology, and it doesn't work. And unfortunately, I've seen people blame the technology when it's the team and it isn't ready to engage with the technology in the way that it needs to be used, and that ultimately that boils down to a leadership thing. Because I'm sure there was some. It wasn't quite as straightforward as just that one simple conversation, just to say, look, you just need to maybe tread a little bit more carefully. That comes through conversation and consultation and positive reinforcement and all of those types of things. But if you don't recognise that, and unfortunately, then you're never going to get to the point of outcome. And I mean, just using that particular example, sleep is the elixir of life. We all know that we're better when we've had our kind of 7 or 8 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in care homes and things, for all sorts of different reasons, it's difficult to maintain that level of sleep. And I don't know exactly what the stats are. Maybe this is something that you doubtless you'll know more than this than I will. But there must be a direct correlation between the quality of sleep and people falling over and causing themselves injuries and stuff.
Exactly. There's, you know, if you don't sleep well at night, the next day you might well want to sleep a lot of the day. So you won't be engaged with people, you might miss meal times, you won't be drinking very much. So, you know, immediately you're more likely to be falling, you're more likely to be getting UTIs, you're more likely to be malnourished, you're more likely to be understimulated. And, you know, there are people who actually do have disrupted sleep patterns or have always slept, you know, they work night shifts, so they tend to sleep during the day. But actually, what at WCS, the first day we retrofitted acoustic listening technology to one of our care homes. The first night we did it, there were 20 residents who were up during the night, and that was normal. But because of the way the technology worked, instead of the staff being on different households, they were all down in one central area. So they brought all those people down and called it the Wide Awake Club. And they were doing different things with people, like somebody was having her hair done, somebody else was watching Only Fools and Horses on video, somebody else was playing a game. And that was great, because actually, rather than, you know, being stuck on a household with a carer who really wants to look after people, you know, go in and check on people or help support people who need help in the night, they're trying to push somebody else back to bed and say, you know, go back to bed, get back into bed. So that was much better. But actually then the leadership part of it was to say, what are the signals that this person needs to go, you know, needs to show that they're tired? And actually, it might be they're hungry, it might be they need a bit more stimulation, it might be they need a chat. And what over time we managed to reduce it to just 2 or 3 people in the Wide Awake Club. So rather than 20 odd people, because actually we had the time, because the technology was doing a lot of the work that previously staff would have done. We had the time to focus on the people who were awake and who did need us, and to actually help get them back into better sleep patterns.
Coming back to what I said earlier, unfortunately, there's people of the mindset who will say it's too expensive. for the thing, and it just comes back to that. That's where that value gets created, where people have got more time, they can invest it into the right stuff, rather than unnecessarily having to spend time on things that could be overcome with technology. And it's just great to hear how that relatively simple investment, I mean, it's simple in as much as the investment, I'm sure the retrofitting was a bit of a job in itself, and the process of kind of going from your 20 in the club down to 2 will have come with its challenges and things, of course. But that's a wonderful place to be over that period of time as well. So with what you've in your time at WCS, there are obviously lots of things that have gone really, really well, and then I'm sure there are some things that maybe wouldn't have gone quite as well as you might have hoped. I guess. I guess with the good stuff, what are the things that I guess you're kind of most proud of? And then with the things that didn't go quite so well, I guess what were they, and kind of what were the big lessons for you from having those kind of opposite ends of the spectrum experiences?
So what I was most proud of was the culture and the values and the ambition that we built, and we built that throughout the organisation and from the bottom to the top. So I'm sure you know people have talked to you about our values, but we created this ambition. And around the time, whenever I looked at what other people's vision or mission was as care providers, it was always to be the best, or you know, that sort of thing, or to be an outstanding provider. Our ambition was that every day would be well lived for our residents. And I was really proud of that, because everybody can relate to that. And actually, you know, if everything you do is striving to deliver that, what can go wrong? So I was really proud of that, and the fact that we built a team who were willing to learn from each other, who were willing to admit to mistakes, who were willing to take risks. And you know, that's what you need in the care sector. You need people who feel able to do that, and they only feel able to do that if the cultural environment's right. So I was really proud of all that, and it was interesting because we were just doing what we were doing. We didn't have a label on it. We didn't know what we were doing. Suddenly people kept wanting to come and see what we were doing, and that was quite tricky to accommodate people, which is why we set up the Innovation Hub. But then Chris Gage from Ladder to the Moon came along and you know, did a bit of work with us and put a label around what we were doing, which was creativity. And so suddenly we got it. Okay, we're being creative. We're being creative because we're looking at things differently. And we're trying new things. So that's what we were proud of. I think where things didn't work so well was when we were over ambitious. So Ed and I, when we opened our second new build, Ed and I was so clear in our vision for what it should be. We knew, you know, it was all about every day well lived. It was all about creating, building a building that actually delivered on stimulating experiences for our residents. But what we didn't really get was how much change that was for the staff who came in to do that. And we didn't focus enough on, we expected too much of people who were traditional carers, and we expected too much change from the manager right down to, you know, the carers. We got there in the end, but there were a few, you know, hairy months where actually people didn't really, they bought into it, but they just didn't have the skills to deliver on it. So that was probably where things went most wrong. And you know, there were a few times we appointed people who didn't fit with the culture, and that very quickly could unravel the culture. Say that was a registered manager, it could very quickly unravel the culture in that home. But I think we had enough in the bank in terms of values and culture that we were able to restore that pretty quickly. So, you know, but every day in a care home environment, and you know, you're talking about people, there's so much that can go wrong. And it does. And you know, WCS was just as flawed as every other provider in that sense.
Okay, so knowing that you never finish building and developing any organisation's culture, what kind of culture were you aspiring to build at WCS?
I don't think it was that conscious. I don't think we were aspiring to build any particular culture or to move away from any particular culture. We were just, and somebody once said to me, not about a couple of years ago, that a chief executive of a care provider had said, oh, we've got to start doing innovation. And I just laughed and said, you can't do innovation. You either are innovative or you're not. And I think so we didn't set out to build a particular type of innovative creative culture. It just evolved because of the people we were and the people we were involved in. And, you know, you said at the beginning, I'm not the most conventional of people, so I wasn't going to come in and say, what are the rules here? How should it look? That's how we want to do it. And I didn't. I came in and said, well, why? Why can't we do it differently? So I think, you know, I provided a little bit of a catalyst in that way. And then Ed and all of the operations team were like, wow, this is exciting. We want to do this. Let's get on with it. So it just, you know, cultures evolve. I'm not sure that you can consciously go in and build a particular culture. It's got to be authentic.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say so. Do you think, so how, when you're looking to, I guess, instill a culture, whether it would be kind of conscious or unconscious, where do you think that people can go wrong when they're kind of trying to nurture culture in their organisation?
I think where they can go right is to be original and play to their strengths rather than trying to create something that actually isn't them. So I think having a lot of self-awareness and understanding who you are as a leadership team is absolutely critical for that. And I think, you know, you've got to be confident. If you're creating a culture and you're trying to give people more autonomy, you've got to be prepared for people to make mistakes and take risks. And you've got to just decide, where do you feel you can take those risks? But not everybody has to be innovative and creative. I mean, I think that's great, but then I wouldn't I? But actually, you know, if that's not your comfort zone, don't try and go there, because it won't work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Coming back to the CQC for a second, how far away do you think the CQC are from understanding or even being able how to regulate around kind of culture, creativity, and innovation?
I think they get it at leadership level, at the sort of national level, and they're very keen to regulate for innovation. And in fact, I was involved a lot of last year on a working party with a number of people from the sector to try and help them shape that, which I think is great. That said, and I said it to them at the time, I'm not sure how compatible it is to be able to regulate innovation, because by its nature, innovation is different. It's out of the box. It's you know, it's coming from an unknown source, because it wouldn't be innovation if it wasn't. So actually, I don't know that you can regulate for that. And I think so. I think they were trying to do that, and it was the right thing to try and do. I think further down the CQC, and you know, at sort of local level, I don't think that there's a massive appetite for innovation. I think it's often not understood and not recognised, and quite intimidating to inspectors who may not be comfortable with some of, you know, with the risk taking or with the technology or whatever. So I think there's a long way to go for innovation to be recognised. And again, you know, I think too many people, when they talk about innovation, think we're talking about technology. And technology is just one of many things that are part of innovation. And actually, innovation is doing things differently.
So taking, I guess, all of that into account as we face the second wave of COVID-19, what can you see being next for the sector? What can you envisage happening?
I think there may be light at the end of the tunnel with vaccination. We don't yet know how that will work, but I think everybody will be hopeful that actually vaccination will help. I think it's been a really difficult, stressful time, and it's been a tragic time. You know, there've been a lot of untimely, distressing deaths in care homes that shouldn't have happened. I think that's been really hard to cope with. And the sector has basically had to lead itself through this. I don't believe that really the support and guidance that it's got from government has been helpful. And I've seen, lots of self-help trained type organisations come out with much more helpful stuff and much earlier. So the sector, in a way, the sector has become stronger as a result of it. And certainly within WCS, there were lots of ways in which communication was massively strengthened, and many people, staff, developed a lot because of what they had to do. So although this is a very difficult time, the whole visitor issue, which I think has become, there's a lot of emotive language used about visitors and the problems that there are with families not being able to visit, because it is really awful, and we would all love for families to be able to visit. But it's not true that all the residents in care homes are fading fast, as I heard a politician saying earlier in the week. Some might have been anyway, and others are still having a good, fulfilling life, even though they would like to see their relatives more, and we would like that to happen. So I think that for the future, I don't think residential care is going to, it's not curtains. Residential care is what I think. I think residential care still is important. It still has a place. I don't know if the funding issues around residential care will ever get solved. I don't actually have much expectation they will, and that will always be a challenge. But I think the sector is stronger. I think there's a better understanding of social care and of social care workers. I think people actually now do understand not just what they do, but actually how much they do and how important they are to our society. So I think that's all good. At the moment, financial recovery is really important. I think that's going to be challenging over the next winter months, and there isn't enough government financial support for the sector. So that there will be a shakedown. There will be, and we're already starting to see care homes being put on the market. Some of which perhaps have come to the end of their lives, and it is time for them to close, but others where that's not the case. And anyway, these are people's homes, and if you're closing down a care home and people have to move, that's a really challenging, tragic thing to have to do to someone at the end of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, this is something I don't know the specific stats around, but I can't imagine that if you're in the last couple of years of your life and moving house, it's pretty stressful for most people. If you add that to somebody that's settled and happy, otherwise having to move out, it's not going to be a great set of circumstances for people. So being conscious of everything that's going on and what's likely to unfold over the coming months, what's your biggest recommendation for providers?
I think you and I said this in a previous conversation. I think you make your own luck in the care sector. So actually be proactive, be confident, do what you think is right, and look ahead, plan ahead. We're not, even with vaccination, things aren't going to change for care homes very much in the next 6 months. So what can you do, and what can you invest in to make life better for your residents, and to hopefully mean that you can carry on admitting new residents. So go out there and take some risks and think for yourself and make it work.
That's some great recommendations. Christine, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for today, and hopefully we can do another episode of the Care Home Show sometime in the future.
Love to. Thank you.